I'm Emma. I'm 34 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I watched my neighbor Lisa crying in her driveway while holding a printed screenshot that would destroy her marriage. The anonymous Instagram account, Our Truth Teller Willow, had just exposed her husband's affair with graphic photos and private messages posted for our entire neighborhood of Willow Creek to see. The autumn wind in our small Connecticut suburb carried the scent of burning leaves as I approached Lisa's trembling form. Her mascara had streaked down her cheeks, creating dark rivers of pain that I'll never forget. "Sarah, how could someone do this?" she whispered, showing me the phone screen. The post had already garnered 847 likes and 203 comments from people in our community, most expressing shock, others adding their own gossip fuel to the fire. If you're finding this story as disturbing as I did, please consider subscribing to hear how this nightmare unfolded in our seemingly perfect neighborhood. Truth Teller Willow had appeared 6 months earlier, starting small with posts about illegal parking and noise complaints. But it quickly escalated to sharing people's personal business, financial troubles, family secrets, and intimate details that should never see the light of day. The account had grown to 3,200 followers, mostly residents from our zip code and surrounding areas. "Nobody knows who's behind it," Lisa continued, her voice breaking. "They know things that only someone very close to us could know. Private conversations, texts, even things said in our own homes." I wrapped my arms around her, feeling the October chill seep through my cardigan. My husband Mike had left for his business trip to Boston that morning, and I'd been looking forward to a quiet day working on my freelance graphic design projects. Instead, I found myself comforting a woman whose life had just been shattered by a digital predator. The comments on Lisa's post were brutal. Anonymous profiles with fake names were dissecting her marriage, calling her names, and sharing additional rumors. Someone had even posted her husband's work address. The cruelty was systematic, calculated, and devastatingly effective. "I'm calling the police," I told her firmly. "They can't do anything," Lisa replied, her voice hollow. "We already tried. The account uses VPNs, fake emails. Everything's untraceable. The police said unless there are direct threats of physical violence, it's not criminal harassment." As I helped Lisa inside her house, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The post about her husband's affair included a photo taken from an angle that suggested the photographer had been inside the hotel lobby. This wasn't just someone sharing secondhand gossip. This was someone actively stalking and documenting people's private moments. That night, I sat in my home office, staring at my computer screen. Our neighborhood Facebook group had exploded with fear and speculation. Parents were afraid to let their children play outside. Couples were suspicious of each other. The sense of community that had drawn Mike and me to Willow Creek 5 years ago was being systematically destroyed by one anonymous account. I decided to start investigating myself. The next morning, I created a spreadsheet documenting every Truth Teller Willow post from the past 6 months. As a graphic designer, I'm naturally detail-oriented, but this felt different, personal. I was hunting a predator who was destroying my community one post at a time. The pattern that emerged was chilling. The account knew intimate details about 27 different families in our area. Not just public information, but private conversations, personal struggles, and secret relationships. Someone had access to text messages, private emails, and even seemed to know what happened inside people's homes. I mapped out the victims on a neighborhood diagram I'd created. The attacks weren't random. They formed a clear geographic pattern centered around our street, Maple Avenue, where Mike and I lived. Whoever was behind this lived close to us, possibly within a 3-block radius. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jenny. "Coffee at Miller's Cafe? I need to talk to someone I trust." 30 minutes later, Jenny sat across from me in our favorite booth, her usually perfect blonde hair disheveled and her hands shaking as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. Miller's Cafe had been our weekly meeting spot for 3 years, but today felt different. The cheerful red checkered tablecloths and the aroma of fresh pastries couldn't mask the fear in her eyes. "Sarah, I think I'm next," she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Yesterday, someone left a note in my mailbox. It just said, I know what you did last summer, with the Truth Teller Willow logo. My heart sank. Jenny had confided in me about her brief emotional affair with her personal trainer 6 months ago. She'd ended it immediately and never told her husband Mark. It was a moment of weakness during a difficult time in their marriage. But if that information became public, it would destroy everything she'd worked to rebuild. What did you do with the note? I asked. I burned it, she replied. But Sarah, the handwriting looked familiar. I can't place it, but I know I've seen it before. This was the break I'd been hoping for. Can you remember anything specific about the handwriting? Was it masculine or feminine? Print or cursive? Jenny closed her eyes, concentrating. It was print, all capital letters. Very neat, almost architectural, like someone who drafts blueprints or does technical drawing. My blood went cold. Mike was a civil engineer. His handwriting was exactly as Jenny described, neat, architectural, precise capital letters. But that was a coincidence. Mike would never do something so cruel. He'd been as disturbed by the Truth Teller Willow posts as everyone else. I need to see your phone, I said suddenly. Jenny looked confused but handed it over. I opened her Instagram and navigated to Truth Teller Willow. Show me exactly which of your followers have been liking and commenting on these posts. As we scrolled through the comments, a pattern emerged. Several accounts were consistently first to comment, always adding fuel to the fire. I screenshotted their profiles and cross-referenced them with Jenny's followers. 3 fake accounts had followed Jenny just days before the note appeared in her mailbox. Someone's been studying you, I told her, planning this attack carefully. Jenny's face paled. What am I going to do? We're going to catch them, I said, with more confidence than I felt. I have a plan. That afternoon, I set up fake Instagram accounts of my own and began following Hogan Truth Teller Willow's followers, looking for patterns in their behavior. I also started documenting the timing of posts. They were always published between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., suggesting someone with a regular daytime job or responsibilities. When Mike returned from Boston that evening, I watched him carefully. He seemed tired but normal, kissing me hello and asking about my day. When I mentioned Lisa's situation, he shook his head sympathetically. It's terrible what's happening to our neighborhood, he said, loosening his tie. Did the police find anything new? Nothing yet, I replied, studying his face for any sign of deception. Mike, have you noticed anything unusual lately? Anyone asking questions about our neighbors or seeming too interested in local gossip? He paused, considering. Not really. Why? Just trying to help figure this out. The person behind this has to be someone local, someone who knows intimate details about people's lives. Mike nodded, but something in his expression seemed guarded. Well, be careful, Sarah. Whoever's doing this is clearly unstable. I don't want you getting too involved. That night, I lay awake listening to Mike's breathing beside me. His concern felt genuine, but there was something else, something I couldn't quite identify. As a graphic designer, I'm trained to notice details, inconsistencies, things that don't quite fit. And something about Mike's reaction felt slightly off. At 1:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. A Truth Teller Willow had posted again. The new post was about the Henderson family 4 blocks away. Truth Teller Willow had exposed Mr. Henderson's gambling addiction with photos of him at an illegal poker game, complete with timestamps and betting amounts. The level of detail was staggering. Someone had been following him, documenting his every move. I slipped out of bed quietly, not wanting to wake Mike, and padded downstairs to my office. The post had been made while Mike was sleeping beside me, which should have cleared him of suspicion. But as I analyzed the images, something caught my attention. The reflection in a car window showed part of the photographer, a tall figure in a dark jacket that looked remarkably similar to Mike's winter coat. My hands were trembling as I enhanced the image using my professional photo editing software. The reflection was blurry, but the build and posture were unmistakably familiar. I'd seen Mike stand exactly like that thousands of times. But this was impossible. Mike had been home with me. Unless... I checked our Ring doorbell footage from the past week. The recordings showed Mike leaving for work each morning and returning each evening, but there were gaps. On Tuesday night, The camera had mysteriously stopped recording between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. The same thing had happened on Friday night, exactly when 2 other On Truth Teller Willow posts had gone live. My heart was pounding as I crept back upstairs. Mike was still sleeping peacefully, his phone charging on the nightstand beside him. I knew his passcode. We'd never kept secrets from each other, or so I thought. With shaking fingers, I unlocked his phone and checked his Instagram. What I found made me feel physically sick. Mike wasn't following Truth Teller Willow from his main account, but his search history showed he'd been viewing the account regularly. More damning, his photo gallery contained dozens of images I'd never seen before. Surveillance photos of our neighbors taken from hidden vantage points around the neighborhood. There were photos of Lisa's husband meeting his mistress, images of the Henderson family's private moments, and screenshots of private conversations that could only have been obtained by hacking into people's phones or computers. I immediately took pictures of everything with my own phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to steady them against the nightstand. In Mike's Notes app, I found drafts of Truth Teller Willow posts, complete with strategic timing plans and target analysis. One note made my blood freeze. Sarah getting suspicious. Need to be more careful. Consider making her the next target to throw her off the scent. The man I'd been married to for 8 years, the man I trusted completely, was the digital terrorist who had been destroying our community. Worse, he was planning to destroy me next. I quietly put his phone back and returned to my office, my mind racing. If you're as shocked as I was by this revelation, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments if you've ever discovered something terrible about someone you trusted. How long had this been going on? Why was Mike doing this? And most importantly, how could I stop him without becoming his next victim? I spent the rest of the night creating a detailed file of evidence. Screenshots, timestamps, analysis of posting patterns, and documentation of how Mike's business trips correlated with gaps in the surveillance that allowed him to stalk our neighbors undetected. By dawn, I had enough evidence to prove Mike was behind Truth Teller Willow, but I also realized how dangerous my situation had become. Mike was methodical, calculating, and clearly willing to destroy anyone who got in his way. If he suspected I knew the truth, there was no telling what he might do. When Mike woke up at 7 a.m., I was in the kitchen making coffee, acting as normal as possible. Every smile felt forced. Every casual conversation felt like a performance. He kissed me goodbye and left for work, completely unaware that his wife had just uncovered his secret identity as a digital predator. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I called Jenny. "I know who Truth Teller Willow is," I said without preamble. "And Jenny, we're all in danger." Jenny met me at Miller's Cafe within an hour, her face pale with disbelief as I showed her the evidence I'd gathered. The morning rush had died down, leaving us relatively alone in the corner booth where we'd shared so many lighter conversations over the years. "This can't be right," she whispered, staring at the photos I'd taken of Mike's phone. "Mike's always been so supportive when we talked about the Truth Teller Willow posts. He seemed as upset as everyone else." "That's what made him so effective," I replied, my voice barely audible. "He could gauge everyone's reactions, see who was getting close to figuring it out, and adjust his strategy accordingly. Jenny, he's been planning to target you next, and he was considering making me a victim to throw off suspicion." Jenny's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down with shaking hands. "What are we going to do? If we go to the police and we're wrong?" "We're not wrong," I interrupted, showing her more evidence. "Look at this posting schedule. Every single Truth Teller Willow post corresponds with times when Mike claimed to be working late or traveling for business. And look at this photo metadata. It shows the exact GPS coordinates where each surveillance photo was taken. I'd spent the morning analyzing every piece of digital evidence, and the pattern was undeniable. Mike had been using his job as a civil engineer, which required him to travel throughout our county for site inspections, as the perfect cover for stalking our neighbors and gathering compromising information. "There's more," I continued, pulling out my laptop. "I found drafts of posts that haven't been published yet. He's targeting the Wilson family next. He has photos of their teenage daughter with her older boyfriend. If this goes public, it could destroy that girl's reputation and her family." Jenny covered her mouth in horror. "We have to stop him." "I have a plan," I said, but it's dangerous. I need to get more evidence while making sure he doesn't realize I know. Tonight, he's supposed to be working late on a project deadline. I'm going to follow him and document whatever he's really doing. Sarah, that's insane. If he's capable of this level of manipulation and stalking, what might he do if he catches you? I'd been asking myself the same question all morning. The man I'd shared a bed with for 8 years had been living a double life, systematically destroying our neighbors' lives for his own twisted satisfaction. I didn't know what he was capable of anymore. I have to try, I said. If I don't stop him tonight, the Wilson girls' photos get posted tomorrow. I can't let that happen. That afternoon, I prepared carefully. I charged a backup phone, installed tracking apps, and wrote a detailed letter explaining everything I'd discovered, which I sealed and left with Jenny to give to the police if something happened to me. Mike came home at his usual time, acting completely normal. He kissed me hello, complained about a difficult client, and settled into his routine of checking emails while I cooked dinner. Watching him, knowing what I now knew, was like seeing a stranger wearing my husband's face. "I'll probably be late tonight," he said over dinner. "The Riverside project deadline is tomorrow, and I need to finish the structural analysis." I nodded sympathetically, playing my part perfectly. "I'll probably be asleep when you get home. Don't forget to eat something." After dinner, Mike gathered his laptop and engineering documents, maintaining the facade that had fooled me for months. He kissed me goodbye, and I watched through the window as his car disappeared down Maple Avenue. I waited exactly 10 minutes before getting into my car and activating the tracking app I'd secretly installed on his phone that morning while he was in the shower. The tracker showed Mike driving toward downtown, but instead of heading to his office, he parked outside a 24-hour electronics store specializing in surveillance equipment. Through my binoculars, I watched him purchase what looked like a high-end camera with a telephoto lens. My heart was pounding as I followed him from a safe distance. Mike drove to the Wilson family's neighborhood and parked 3 blocks away, then walked through a wooded area that provided a perfect view of their backyard. He was scouting locations for his next attack. I documented everything: his route, the equipment he'd purchased, the timestamps of his surveillance activities. When he finally returned to his car around 11 p.m., I raced home ahead of him, making sure I was in bed pretending to sleep when he arrived. Mike slipped into bed beside me at 11:47 p.m., believing his secret was still safe. But I lay awake planning his downfall, knowing that tomorrow I would have to confront the monster who had been sleeping next to me all along. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, please subscribe and share it with others who need to know that digital predators can be hiding in plain sight, even in our own homes. The next morning, I waited until Mike left for work before implementing the final phase of my plan. I needed undeniable proof that would hold up in court and couldn't be dismissed as coincidence or circumstantial evidence. I drove to our local police station and spoke with Detective Rodriguez, who had been handling the Truth Teller Willow complaints. Initially skeptical of my accusations against my own husband, her expression grew increasingly serious as I presented my evidence. "Mrs. Chen, these are serious allegations," Detective Rodriguez said, studying the photos and documents I'd compiled. "If you're right, your husband has committed multiple felonies: stalking, harassment, invasion of privacy, and potentially computer crimes. But we need to catch him in the act." Together, we developed a plan. That evening, I would act normally while police surveillance teams positioned themselves around our neighborhood. If Mike left the house to conduct surveillance activities, they would document everything and arrest him with evidence in hand. The waiting was excruciating. Mike came home from work seeming agitated, constantly checking his phone and laptop. During dinner, he kept glancing toward the Wilson family's house, which was visible from our kitchen window. "Everything okay?" I asked, forcing myself to sound casual. "Just work stress," he replied, but his eyes had a calculating look I'd never noticed before. "I might need to go out later to check on a job site. The foundation inspection can't wait until tomorrow." I nodded understandingly, knowing this was likely his cover story for stalking the Wilson family. "Of course. I'll probably turn in early anyway." At 9:30 p.m., Mike kissed me goodnight and headed out, carrying his engineering equipment, which I now knew contained surveillance gear. Through our bedroom window, I watched him drive away, then immediately texted Detective Rodriguez. "He's moving." What happened next unfolded like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Police surveillance followed Mike to the same wooded area where I'd seen him the night before. This time, he set up sophisticated photography equipment and waited for the Wilson family's teenage daughter to return from her evening jog. The telephoto lens he'd purchased was powerful enough to capture intimate details from hundreds of yards away. At 10:15 p.m., as Mike photographed the unsuspecting girl through her bedroom window, police moved in. Detective Rodriguez called me at 10:47 p.m. "We have him, Mrs. Chen. Your husband is in custody." I sat in my empty house, surrounded by 8 years of marriage memories that now felt like lies. Photo albums showing our happy moments, wedding pictures, vacation souvenirs, all of it contaminated by the knowledge that the man I'd loved had been systematically destroying innocent people's lives. The police search of our house revealed the full scope of Mike's operation. Hidden in our basement was a sophisticated surveillance setup with multiple monitors, hard drives containing thousands of compromising photos and videos of our neighbors, and detailed files on every family in a 6-block radius. He'd been hacking into people's home Wi-Fi networks, accessing their security cameras, and even planting listening devices during social gatherings at our house. Some of our neighbors' most private moments had been recorded without their knowledge. The most disturbing discovery was Mike's motivation, revealed in detailed journals hidden behind false walls in his home office. He wasn't seeking money or revenge against specific individuals. He was addicted to the power of controlling and destroying people's lives. He wrote about the rush of watching families fall apart after his posts, the satisfaction of seeing strong people crumble under public humiliation. One entry, dated just 2 weeks earlier, chilled me to the bone. "Sarah's getting too curious about the neighborhood situation. Time to teach her a lesson about minding her own business. Her affair with her college professor 7 years ago would make an excellent first post. She thinks she buried that secret, but I've been saving it for the right moment." He'd been planning to destroy me too. Detective Rodriguez showed me this entry during my statement the following morning. "Mrs. Chen, did you have an affair 7 years ago?" "Yes," I admitted, feeling ashamed even though the relationship had ended before Mike and I were married. "It was before Mike and I got engaged. I never told him about it because it felt irrelevant to our relationship." How could he have known? The answer became clear as we examined Mike's surveillance files. He'd been monitoring my computer and phone for years, reading my private emails, accessing my social media accounts, and building psychological profiles not just of our neighbors, but of me. Our entire marriage had been built on his deception and my ignorance of the predator I was living with. 3 months later, I sat in courtroom 4B, watching Mike plead guilty to 23 felony charges, including stalking, invasion of privacy, computer fraud, and harassment. The man I'd married looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, but his eyes still held that calculating coldness I'd learned to recognize too late. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in prison, followed by lifetime registration as a cyberstalker. The Truth Teller Willow account had been permanently deleted, but the damage to our community was irreversible. Lisa and her husband had divorced, despite working to rebuild their relationship after the affair was exposed. The Henderson family had moved to another state to escape the gambling addiction publicity. Jenny and Mark were in counseling, trying to heal from the violation of having their private struggles exposed to the world. The Wilson family's teenage daughter had attempted suicide 2 weeks after Mike's arrest, when she learned how close she'd come to having intimate photos posted online. She was recovering, but the trauma of knowing she'd been watched and photographed without her knowledge would probably affect her for years. As for me, I was learning to rebuild my life from the ground up. The house felt empty and contaminated, so I moved into a downtown apartment while it went through probate proceedings. I'd started therapy to process the psychological manipulation I'd endured without realizing it. Dr. Martinez, my therapist, helped me understand that I'd been a victim too. "Coercive control doesn't always involve physical violence," she explained during one of our sessions. "Your husband isolated you emotionally, monitored your activities, and maintained power through deception. You couldn't have known because he was carefully hiding his true nature. The hardest part was accepting that the man I'd loved had never really existed. The kind, supportive husband I'd known was a carefully constructed persona designed to provide cover for Mike's real activities. Every conversation we'd had about the Truth Teller Willow attacks had been him gathering intelligence and enjoying his secret power over our community. I testified at the trial, helping prosecutors understand the full scope of Mike's operation. The evidence we'd gathered led to additional charges when police discovered he'd been selling some of the compromising information to online harassment forums and revenge porn sites. During victim impact statements, our neighbors shared stories of depression, anxiety, job loss, and relationship destruction caused by Mike's posts. Mr. Henderson had lost his job when his gambling addiction was exposed. 3 other families had moved away to escape the shame and continued harassment from internet trolls who'd latched onto Mike's posts. Your actions destroyed not just individual lives, but the fabric of an entire community, Judge Morrison told Mike before sentencing. You violated the most basic trust between neighbors and used technology to weaponize private information for your own gratification. Mike showed no remorse during the proceedings. Even in his final statement to the court, he maintained that he'd been exposing hypocrisy and that his victims deserved what they got for their poor choices. 6 months after Mike's conviction, I started a nonprofit organization called Digital Privacy Defense, focused on educating communities about cyberstalking and helping victims of online harassment. The experience taught me that predators often hide in plain sight, using positions of trust and intimacy to gather information they later weaponize. If this story has impacted you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with others. Digital predators are real, and they're often closer than we think, sometimes sleeping in the bed next to us. I still live with the knowledge that for 8 years, I shared my life with someone who was capable of systematic cruelty toward innocent people. But I also know that recognizing the signs and speaking up when something feels wrong can prevent other communities from experiencing what happened to Willow Creek. The Truth Teller Willow account is gone, but the lessons from its reign of terror remain. Trust your instincts, protect your digital privacy, and remember that the most dangerous predators are often the ones who seem most trustworthy. Mike is now serving his sentence in a medium-security prison in upstate New York. I've received several letters from him, which I've turned over to police without reading. Detective Rodriguez assured me that any attempt to contact me violates his restraining order and could add years to his sentence. Sometimes I wonder if I could have seen the signs earlier, if I could have prevented some of the damage he caused. But Dr. Martinez reminds me that Mike's actions were his choice, not my failure. I was a victim who found the strength to become a survivor, and eventually, someone who could help protect others. Our neighborhood is slowly healing, though it will never be the same. New families have moved into the houses left vacant by Mike's victims, and gradually, people are learning to trust again. The community garden that had been abandoned during the Truth Teller Willow terror has been restored, and children play outside again without their parents constantly worrying about who might be watching. As I finish writing this account, sitting in my new apartment overlooking the Connecticut River, I'm reminded that evil can hide behind the most ordinary faces. But I'm also reminded that ordinary people have extraordinary power to fight back when they find the courage to seek the truth. If you found this story valuable, please like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments. Together, we can create communities where digital predators can't hide in the shadows of our trust.